What's up, guys? This is Felipe from the Noob Trader, and in today's video, we're going to basically look at the gold charts, talk a little bit about gold, and talk about where gold potentially could be going, especially with the upcoming NFP report that this jobs report, as everybody knows, typically moves the market quite a bit. So we're going to kind of be looking ahead towards that this Friday, and just see where gold may be going over the next few weeks. So let's get into it. So if we look at gold, right now we're on the daily chart. If we look at gold's last few days of price action, obviously we had the big drop off from after the Fed press conference, you know, but I think actually everything that I was kind of hoping for in terms of the press conference outcome when it comes to price action really did kind of materialize here. What we saw, of course, is that initial short-term volatility to the downside. Everybody freaked out. People were also buying the hype, kind of selling the news. All of that kind of was going on. But once the market really settled, we saw a pretty strong bounce, and we kind of set a kind of higher low here, and we just continued in this price wedge that's forming on the daily chart, right? We got rejected here at the high tops towards 1850. Then we got a strong bounce here at the bottom end of the wedge at 1780, which really shows you ultimately that kind of like what we discussed in the last video, not much really came out actually of the Fed press conference, right? Everything kind of went to expectation, and it also kind of suggests or shows us, or shows me at least, that the market had already kind of digested the inflation news, and everybody kind of was waiting more for March. There wasn't much to be expected really for the January side. And people who said otherwise, I think, were full of shit, And we all know how Powell operates right now. Powell doesn't act irrationally, and he has been signaling the rate hike, later on in Q1 this year for a long, long time now. So I don't know why anybody expected otherwise, but that's what we really saw. Ultimately, what we wanted to see is a bounce. Like, where were we going to bounce? And sure enough, we bounced on the wedge, and now we're kind of trending back towards 1800. Okay, heading into the NFP data coming this week. So I think the reality is that right now, just given when we're talking about trading gold, especially on longer term time frames, we have to really think about the overarching narratives that are going on in the space. And right now, again, there's two key narratives that are really pushing everything. The first one is the inflation slash interest rate hike narrative, that everybody's kind of causing everybody to kind of freak out, caused obviously the stock market to kind of freak out over the last, over the past week, and now it's kind of recovering a bit. There's that whole narrative. And then the second one, which is particularly are important for the gold market, is what's going on right now in terms of the political tensions between the US and Russia, right? Again, gold really moves, or gold really reacts to fear. There's definitely a relationship there. If you study the gold market long enough, we know this. And right now, these two key narratives are what is really pushing any sort of fear in the market. And consequently, I do think that um, unless there's like a pretty strong interest rate hike, I do think that with all this fear that's been accumulating, um, recently in terms of the narratives over the next few weeks, this fear is ultimately going to probably push gold at least more bullish, and definitely I don't think is necessarily going to lead gold to go more bearish. I mean, not until we start really approaching that kind of March Fed press conference. Okay, so given all of this, given that we know that these are kind of the two key narratives I think that are going to be driving the gold market over the coming weeks, the reality is that unlike normal, when normally the NFP report is often a big market mover, I really believe that this week's NFP is not going to affect the market too much. Okay. In case you guys aren't aware, the NFP report comes out 8:30 p.m. my time here in Thailand. So I think it's like 8:30 or 7:30, whatever, in the US in the morning. Um, Comes out on Friday, and this is basically the data report which shows how many new jobs have basically been created in that particular month in the economy. The reality is, though, is that in previous months, or over the last year in 2021, when we had a lot of big misses, we saw lots of big volatility in the market just because at the time there was the real narrative was focused much more on, okay, is the economy recovering from the COVID fiasco? Are people getting back to work? People were still unemployed and all those different types of things. But now the narrative has really, really switched. And in particular, as the economy is starting to recover more, Omicron is starting to become a thing of, the past or something that isn't really driving markets anymore. And as the inflation is really the big economic narrative that everybody's focusing on, right? Jobs reports aren't really going to be doing too much, right? As the economy continues to recover, we can't always expect the jobs reports to necessarily be, when we get a big hit or miss, it to really mean that much, because the reality is that people are slowly getting back to work, and this is what's happening right now in the States. Um, a miss in the job report right now is just not going to move the market nearly as much, just because there's not just as big of a focus on jobs right now as there was, like, let's say 6 months ago. And that's what we also saw with the last NFP report that came out at the beginning of January, right? Even though there was quite a big miss from the forecast, almost it was a 210,000 um, miss, right, in terms of the data. Gold price didn't really move that much, right? Gold price, there was not a lot of volatility at that particular time. Look, as we can see here, January 7th, gold didn't really do too much, right? A lot of the other key narratives were what really drove gold's price over then the coming weeks, such as the inflation and the stock market and blah, 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 blah. All those different types of things, right? So ultimately, um, I know this isn't very exciting, but I don't really see something big or some crazy price volatility coming out of the NFP report this time around either. Okay. I think that most likely what's going to happen with the NFP report is that, we'll probably miss, maybe it'll miss a little bit, maybe we'll go above, or maybe we'll even do a lot better than the forecast. Maybe it'll be 250 or 300K instead of the 150K forecast. But the reality is that jobs data report, whether it's a miss or a hit or whatever, um, does not really contribute too much to what are the two key narratives driving the market, right? The tensions, the political tensions, and the inflation problem / interest rate hikes, right? Inflation is still there regardless of the jobs report. The interest rate hike looming is still there regardless of the jobs report. If we have a big miss in the jobs report, let's say the forecast is 150, let's say we hit only, let's say 100K or below 100K, um, is that really going to change Powell's opinion right now on raising interest rates in March? I don't think so. If if the if we hit a lot higher, let's say 300K, right, and shows that the economy is really recovering, is that really going to change Powell's opinion? Is it going to make him want to raise interest rates sooner, like at the end of February? No, that's again, that's just not how Powell operates, right? He likes to operate in a very slow and steady manner. So I don't expect too much really from this NFP report. That's kind of what I'm expecting. Could I be wrong? Of course, 100%. You never really know with these things. And often with the NFP, as proven in history, when you think you know what's going to happen, it just goes totally the opposite. And, before you know it, price is going up and down like crazy. So let's see how it goes. But I don't have too many expectations really on the NFP report for this week. Um, and ultimately, I still think that these two narratives that I've just been mentioning are not going to go away, and they're going to continue being the driving force in the market. Okay. So where do I kind of expect gold price to really be going? I assume that we will probably at some point, I'm not saying it's going to be this week or even next week, but at some point um, in the coming weeks, we will retest 1830 again. I'm not sure if we're going to necessarily get break out of it. It depends how much fear is really building into the market. But I'm sure we'll probably test there, maybe get rejected, and just continue in this price wedge. I really struggle to see how we're going to, in terms of price action, how we're going to be getting out of this price wedge until March rolls around. the whole market is waiting for March. The whole market is waiting to see what Powell really is going to do on March. Okay, he's been talking about that date now for quite some time. So until March rolls around, unless something drastic happens, unless something crazy happens in terms of, political news or whatever, I don't see how we really get out of this wedge here. Um, you know, unless the stock market just freaks out, and people start panic selling, I don't see how we get out of this wedge here, which ultimately, if you're more kind of short-term trading gold, should be great because, I mean, you kind of know where price is going to go. Price is just kind of staying in the same general price range. The, 1750 and above, 1760 and above, 1780 and above, and then 1830 and below, 1840 and below, so forth, right? So I kind of expect more of the same this week, but let's see how it goes. Okay, guys? Anyways, if you like this video, please consider giving it a thumbs up. If you have a question, leave a comment and I'll definitely respond. And I'll see you in the next video. Take care, guys.